For nearly a decade, Ford's 10-speed automatic transmission has been one of the most talked about and controversial components in modern trucks and performance vehicles. Introduced with big promises of better fuel economy, faster acceleration, and improved towing performance, the 10-speed was supposed to be a game-changer. Instead, it became one of the most debated transmissions in Ford's history. Now, as the 2026 model year approaches, a new question is dominating truck forums, dealership conversations, and engineering discussions inside Detroit. Did Ford just quietly kill the 10-speed as we know it? The short answer is no, but the long answer is far more interesting. What Ford is doing for 2026 isn't a simple update or minor tweak. According to engineers, suppliers, and industry analysts, the 2026 fix fundamentally changes how the 10-speed behaves, how it's calibrated, and how it fits into Ford's long-term powertrain strategy. Some insiders even argue this isn't the same transmission anymore, at least not in spirit. To understand why this matters, we need to go back to how the 10-speed earned its reputation in the first place. Why the 10-speed became Ford's most controversial transmission. When Ford launched the 10-speed automatic, co-developed with General Motors, expectations were sky-high. More gears meant tighter ratios, keeping engines in their optimal power bands, improving fuel efficiency, and enhancing towing stability. On paper, it was brilliant engineering. In real-world use, however, many owners experienced something very different. Drivers reported harsh shifts, gear hunting at low speeds, delayed engagement, and unpredictable downshifts, especially in stop-and-go traffic or while towing. The problem wasn't universal, but it was widespread enough to damage consumer trust. Transmission specialists point out that the issue was rarely mechanical failure. Instead, the root problem was software calibration combined with driver behavior adaptation. The 10-speed was too smart for its own good, explains a veteran powertrain engineer who previously worked on automatic transmission tuning. It tried to anticipate everything: throttle input, load, grade, temperature, and when those inputs conflicted, the shifts felt confused. Ford issued multiple software updates over the years, and many later models behaved far better than early versions. Still, the reputation stuck. By the early 2020s, the phrase 10-speed issues had become part of truck culture. Fair enough. Why Ford didn't just scrap the 10-speed? Given the backlash, many expected Ford to abandon the 10-speed entirely, but that was never realistic. From an engineering and financial perspective, the 10-speed platform is deeply integrated into Ford's ecosystem. It supports everything from EcoBoost V6 engines to high-output V8s and heavy-duty towing configurations. Replacing it outright would require billions in redevelopment, retooling, and certification. More importantly, Ford engineers know the hardware itself is fundamentally strong. From a durability standpoint, the 10-speed is not the weak link people think it is, says a drivetrain durability consultant who works with multiple OEMs. The clutch packs, planetary gears, and torque capacity are actually very robust. The complaints are about feel, not failure. That distinction matters. Instead of killing the 10-speed, Ford chose a more radical approach, re-engineering how it behaves, how it communicates with the engine, and how much control it gives back to the driver. That's where the 2026 fix comes in. The 2026 strategy. Fewer shifts, smarter gears. One of the biggest misconceptions about the 10-speed is that it must constantly use all 10 gears. In reality, Ford engineers realized the transmission was shifting too often, especially during light throttle driving. For 2026, Ford's recalibration strategy focuses on gear consolidation. Instead of bouncing between closely spaced ratios, the transmission now holds gears longer, skips unnecessary shifts, and behaves more like a traditional 6 or 8-speed during normal driving. An engineer familiar with the update explains it this way: "We stopped chasing theoretical efficiency numbers and started prioritizing real-world drivability. If the truck doesn't need to shift, it doesn't shift. Gear hunting at city speeds. The death of overcorrection software." Another major change for 2026 is the reduction of what engineers internally call overcorrection logic. Earlier versions of the 10-speed aggressively adjusted shift behavior based on recent driving inputs. If the system detected even minor throttle changes, it would preemptively downshift, often unnecessarily. For 2026, Ford simplified the decision tree. The transmission now relies more heavily on steady-state inputs rather than constantly predicting what the driver might do next. Transmission calibration experts say this is a return to fundamentals. Drivers don't want a transmission that guesses, says an independent calibration consultant. They want one that responds. Ford finally recognized that distinction. The result is a transmission that feels calmer, more confident, and far less reactive. Towing and hauling, where the 2026 fix matters most. The 10-speed's reputation suffered the most in towing scenarios. Under load, frequent downshifts could make the truck feel unsettled, even if performance numbers were strong. For 2026, Ford made towing behavior a top priority. The updated calibration allows the transmission to lock into fewer gears when towing, reducing heat buildup and minimizing unnecessary shifting on grades. Downshifts are now triggered by torque demand rather than throttle position alone. A towing performance engineer explains, we focused on torque stability. When you're pulling 10,000 lb, consistency matters more than quick shifts. This approach not only improves driver confidence, but also reduces long-term wear, a key factor for fleet buyers and long-term owners. The role of hybridization in the 2026 update. Another reason the 10-speed isn't going away is its compatibility with hybrid systems. Ford's PowerBoost hybrid architecture relies on the 10-speed housing, integrating an electric motor between the engine and transmission. For 2026, Ford refined this integration even further. Electric torque fill now compensates for fewer downshifts, allowing the transmission to stay in higher gears without sacrificing responsiveness. Hybrid powertrain experts point out that this fundamentally changes how the 10-speed operates. With electric assist, you don't need constant gear changes to feel strong acceleration. That's a massive advantage. This hybrid synergy makes the 2026 transmission feel smoother than any previous version, even in non-hybrid models that benefit from shared calibration logic. Is Ford quietly preparing for fewer gears overall? One of the most interesting implications of the 2026 fix is what it suggests about Ford's future. While the transmission still has 10 physical gears, many engineers now admit that not all gears are equally important. In practice, the updated 10-speed behaves more like a smart 8-speed, with the upper and lower ratios reserved for specific conditions like highway cruising or heavy towing. Industry analysts see this as a strategic hedge. Ford isn't killing the 10-speed, but they're de-emphasizing the idea that more gears are always better, says an automotive industry analyst. It's about intelligent use, not headline numbers. This philosophy could influence future transmissions, especially as electrification reduces the need for complex gear sets. Reliability. What changes for long-term owners? One of the biggest concerns surrounding the 10-speed has always been longevity. Experts agree that the 2026 changes should improve long-term reliability, not because the hardware changed dramatically, but because the transmission is working less aggressively. Fewer shifts mean less clutch engagement, lower heat cycles, and reduced wear over time. A transmission rebuild specialist offers this perspective. Any automatic transmission will last longer if it's not constantly hunting for gears. The 2026 calibration is simply easier on the hardware. This is particularly important for owners who plan to keep their trucks beyond warranty periods. Why Ford didn't make this change sooner? A fair question is why it took Ford this long. The answer lies in regulatory pressure, internal benchmarks, and the reality of modern vehicle development. Early calibrations prioritized fuel economy targets and emissions compliance, sometimes at the expense of subjective feel. Over time, customer feedback forced a shift in priorities. OEMs are finally accepting that driver perception matters as much as lab data, says a former OEM calibration manager. Ford's 2026 update reflects that cultural change. What this means for 2026 Ford trucks. For buyers considering a 2026 Ford F-150 Super Duty or performance model, the transmission story is no longer a warning sign. It's a selling point. The updated 10-speed delivers smoother driving, better towing confidence, and improved long-term durability without sacrificing performance or efficiency. Importantly, Ford didn't market this as a revolution. Instead, the changes are subtle, technical, and largely invisible, which may be exactly why they work. Final verdict: did Ford kill the 10-speed? Ford didn't kill the 10-speed, they fixed its personality. The 2026 update transforms the transmission from an overeager gear changer into a confident, refined workhorse. By prioritizing real-world driving behavior over theoretical efficiency, Ford addressed the root causes of customer frustration. From an expert standpoint, this is one of the most meaningful powertrain updates Ford has made in years. Not because it introduced new hardware, but because it finally aligned engineering with how people actually drive. For longtime skeptics, the 2026 fix may not erase the past, but for future owners, it changes everything.